Hey everyone, thanks for tuning in. If you're new here, consider subscribing. It really helps keep these stories coming. And while you're here, let me know in the comments where you're listening from. Now, sit back, relax, and let's get into the story. I drove east on US Route 40 just after first light, the truck hood vibrating at a steady buzz that matched the low rumble under my ribs. The old Ford Ranger was never meant to carry the weight I had piled into it. Fuel cans lashed with nylon straps, a plastic tote of medical supplies, a repair roll with basic tools, water jugs wedged behind the passenger seat. But the engine still pulled clean, and the analog needles on the dash gave me something simple to read in a world that had stopped speaking plainly. A Remington 870 pump-action shotgun lay on the bench seat with its action open, zip-tied to a metal loop I'd screwed into the floor. It was the one sound I could still trust, the clack of the pump, the mechanical honesty of parts doing what they were designed to do. The handheld CB radio on the dash scanned through empty channels, occasionally catching a burst of static and a voice that faded before I could answer. I kept the squelch low in case somebody out there had found the courage or the desperation to key a mic and try. 30 days had turned the interstate into a long memorial. Cars were angled across lanes as if people had decided too late which direction they should go. There were trucks still hitched to boats with their covers on, travel trailers with the stairs down, and a school bus with a hand-painted shelter sign in the front window. I kept my speed under 40, cutting left and right through gaps where I could, easing between doors left open like arms. It felt wrong to look inside, so I didn't. I watched the edges of the roadway for movement and kept both hands steady on the wheel. Anytime I saw a cluster of vehicles tight enough to hide something, I moved to the shoulder and crept by with the brake lights strobing gently. My father taught me to drive on gravel. Eyes ahead, steady inputs, no sudden moves, and those rules still applied. I had taped an old paper map over the center console with blue painter's tape. I had marked it up with a fine-tip pen over the last few days, circles and X's and single-word notes. Bridge okay, pumps dry, dogs, and a star on Millfield like a pin through a heart. The direct route off Interstate 70 would have cut through 2 suburbs that went to panic early. I had seen what panic did to streets on the first day when I was still working shifts in Columbus. As a paramedic, you learn to read a scene before you step into it. A quiet street with a broken window and no people can be worse than a clogged street with shouting, because quiet sometimes means people learn something you haven't yet. I pointed the nose of the truck toward the back roads. County Road 14, then 21, then a farm track I knew from fishing trips along a creek my brother and I used to wander before dinner. The tracker app on my phone was useless now, but the phone still charged from a dash inverter, and it still had the photos I couldn't let myself swipe through. I kept a dictaphone on the passenger seat and clicked it on whenever the engine noise let me think. Ethan Ward, I said at 7:22 a.m., because putting my name into the air felt like making a handhold. Leaving Franklin County, heading for Millfield. Weather is clear. Wind light from the west. Fuel at 3/4. No contacts on CB-19. No visible animals on the road. No new fires in the distance. I logged it like a patient report, the kind of habit that stains your bones after enough years. There was comfort in the cadence, in the way data stacked into meaning. I clicked it off, then on again a minute later because the word Millfield had trembled on my tongue. Plan. Enter town at the west end to avoid the shopping plaza. Park behind the diner. On foot to the high school, then Maple Street. Collect the photograph. Check the fire station. Exit north along the rail spur if Main is blocked. I clicked it off again and tried to breathe normally. The first time I stopped was at a rest area where the state had set garbage cans in neat rows, as if order worked like a fence against panic. The vending machines were open, the glass cracked, coils empty, A National Guard No Services sign was zip-tied to a wooden post. I rolled the truck under a stand of trees where I could see both entrances and turned the key off. The sudden quiet made the engine tick as it cooled. I listened for the shuffle that shouldn't be there, for the low sound people make when they think they're alone. What I heard was the breeze working through leaves and the tap of a loose license plate frame on a car a few spots over. I stepped out with the shotgun angled down across my body, chamber empty, safety on, and walked a slow circle. She saw me before I saw her. "You can lower that," a woman's voice said from behind the fuel island. I turned with both hands firm. She stood with her empty palms away from her body, a ratchet in one and a piece of hose looped around her wrist. "I'm not here to cause trouble," she said, nodding at the shotgun. "I'm just stealing fuel from the government, which I think is late enough that they won't mind." "Maya?" I asked before I could stop myself. It wasn't her, it just felt like a name that had stayed in my head since one of those early calls. A National Guard truck stuck in a narrow alley, and a sergeant with grease on her cheek telling me she'd been a mechanic before, and during, and after. The memory slipped its own timing chain sometimes. The woman laughed once without smiling. "Maya works," she said. "If you need to call me something. Guard unit out of Mansfield till we weren't. You look like you're on a mission." "Going home," I said. Her face softened like someone who knows what a word costs. "The small towns are nests now," she said quietly. "They settle there, grocery stores, schools, anywhere with a lot of doors. If you have to go in fast and leave faster. Don't get curious." "I'm looking for a photograph," I said, because lying to someone who had just taught me something felt wrong. "Then don't take the front door," she said. "And don't second-guess yourself on the way out." She pointed to the CB speaker in my window. 19 is mostly ghosts. Try 9 if you need help. There's still a few of us who keep an ear out. "Are you heading anywhere?" I asked. "North," she said. There was a group at a hospital campus up there that was doing okay with a generator and a well. Not my scene, but it's a point on the map. People like points on maps. Keeps the wheels turning. She capped a jerry can, wiped her hands with a shop rag, and gave me a look like she could see through plans to the doubt under them. "Be quick," she said. "And for what it's worth, I hope you find it." I topped off my tank from one of my cans and gave her the rest of the fuel hose I had fashioned from a garden hose and a siphon bulb. I didn't say it out loud, but sharing small things felt like defiance against the idea that every day after the first was going to be worse. When I got back into the cab, I wrote, "Maya, Mansfield NG, North, Channel 9, on the map margin and then folded the paper over the note as if I could keep the usefulness inside. The landscape tilted rural after that. The highway shoulders gave way to ditches. The fields looked like they were holding their breath. Corn standing dry and tall. Soybeans browning in a way that would have been normal in a different year. I kept scanning fence rows and the tree lines where driveways disappeared. Dogs had formed their own rules in these places. When they came fast, and I carried a compact air horn in my pocket to break their focus before anything else. The air horn was bright and simple and had worked twice in the last week. Not everything had to escalate. The Welcome to Millfield sign lay face down where the western approach curved left under the water tower. Someone had tried to pull it upright with a rope. The rope had snapped, and the sign had crushed a patch of goldenrod. I stopped the truck behind the Main Street diner, positioning the front bumper against a brick wall so the engine bay was protected. I pocketed the truck keys and clipped a spare set to my belt. I slid the shotgun's action forward and felt the bolt seat. The weight in my hands was familiar without being comforting. I wasn't here to clear anything. I was here to walk where I used to walk and leave with a rectangle of paper that my mother kept in a drawer. Inside the diner, the chrome counter was dull with dust. The booths had that slight list that happens when a building starts to lose its sense of straight. A jukebox stared at the room like a blank eye. It had always eaten quarters. I stood there longer than I should have because the smell of the place, old coffee and sugar, warm vinyl, something floral from the cleaner the morning shift used, had hollowed out and been replaced by damp and a faint metal tang from the kitchen. In the pass-through, a stack of plates still leaned where someone left them. There were no broken ones on the floor. The detail mattered because somebody had left calmly or carefully or too early for breaking. I took a step toward the pass-through to angle for the back door and stopped because something moved at the edge of the stainless steel. It was the small tremble of a shoe on tile. The apron was still tied around the waist and the name tag was still on the chest. The way she turned toward the sound of my foot was slow, head first, then shoulders. I placed my hand on the doorframe to mark the distance in my head. I said the name I remembered very softly, and the face did not change, and the breath came ragged in a way no one ever has unless their lungs are no longer playing by the rules they were given. I backed away, kept the counter between us, eased the front door open until the bell was one nudge from ringing, and then caught the bell with my fingers as it swung. I eased it shut and stood outside with my back on the glass and counted to 30. Main Street had never been wide, but without cars, it looked like a stage. The hardware store sign was still there. White letters against navy, Wardson's Hardware, though we had never been more than Wardson while my father was alive. I couldn't go in. Not yet. To the east, the high school stood on the rise like the town had always intended for people to look up at it and feel an ache. The flag was there, tangled around itself mid-pole. I cut across the ball fields, moving on the grass instead of the paved path to avoid the sound of pebble crunch. The outfield fence had buckled where vines had pulled. A bat lay against the backstop like a sleeping dog. I remembered my brother's laugh when he popped one over left, low and fast, and looked back for our father's nod. That was a safe memory. It ran like a clean engine. The main doors of the school were locked, which was new to me because I remembered them open for most of my life. A window in the locker room wing had already paid the price for what I needed. I eased the broken glass out of the lower frame with a gloved hand and stepped through, using a towel from my pack to drape over the shards. The air inside had that old building smell. Floor wax, dust, a hint of gym rubber. I paused in the dim light and listened. When schools are empty, they breathe. The ventilation pushes and pulls and doors flex. Pipes tick. All that was gone. I moved down the hall past trophy cases that had given the town a reason to pretend winter didn't last too long. The gym doors opened at a push, the squeak of the hinge running too loud in the quiet. On the far wall, someone had taken a can of black paint to concrete and written names. They were in rows, some careful, some scrawled, some only initials, with dates that all crowded into the first week after the first emergency alert. Jared Ward 3 days after, sat at eye level like it had waited for me. I pressed my palm to it, not hard, just enough to imagine warmth. I stood there and let the time I'd been holding roll over me in a slow wave. The paint wasn't really dry anymore. It had long since cured. I took out the dictaphone, turned it on, and said, "Jared, I'm here." I took what I could carry that made sense. A duffel from the locker room with a gym towel inside that still smelled like detergent. A pair of old stock batteries from the custodian's closet. A flashlight with a lens not fogged by age. I found a nurse's office with a cabinet that hadn't been completely emptied. Elastic bandages, a box of sterile gauze, a thermometer that didn't need electricity. There were notes pinned to a corkboard about a winter blood drive we never held. I folded one of the notices into a square and slid it into my pocket, because the small things make big things feel like they're not pulling you apart. On Maple Street, the oak trees arched overhead the way they had every October, but the leaves had gone past bright into the dry part, rattling against each other with a sound like paper. The front steps of our house had cracked along the mortar lines. The screen door had a fresh bend at the bottom where something heavy had pushed through. I cleared the living room with the sections of the house in my head, saying the names of the rooms softly to myself because it helped me move in the order that felt right. Front room, hall, kitchen, stairs. The air smelled like damp gypsum, old tea, and a trace of dryer sheets from the laundry room that shouldn't have held on as long as it did but had. On the dining table, my mother's reading glasses sat folded on a novel she would have recommended to me across a kitchen island once. The mug next to them had watermarks below the line where the drink had evaporated. Everywhere I looked, there were the small facts of a life paused and then left behind hard. I went upstairs and turned left out of habit because that had always been my room. The right turn at the landing went to my parents'. I didn't go in there yet. The photo was in the top drawer of the dresser in my room under a stack of old school certificates and a Lake Erie fishing license. It was in a cheap wooden frame, and the corner had singed once when it sat too close to a candle at a birthday dinner 10 years ago. We had joked about it. The burn mark had become the way we identified the photo from 20 others in a box. In the image, my father's hand is on my shoulder, and my brother is squinting into the sun, and my mother is looking at us instead of the camera, which is the only way I know she was the one in charge of making sure we were okay. I held it hard enough that the glass flexed, then slid it into a padded envelope I had brought for exactly this and tucked it deep into my pack. I heard it then. A slow step, a shift of weight at the end of the hall. It is different from any other sound a person makes when they are looking for something that will give them meaning. There is no call of a name, no pause for listening, no hesitation in the rhythm. It is a sound that moves through air like water, steady for as long as it has to. I didn't step toward it. I didn't explain myself out loud. I put my palm against the bedroom window to see if the paint had glued it shut. It gave. I looked once down the hallway and saw the flannel shirt my father wore when he thought work might include splinters, and I knew what my chest would do if I tried to force a story over what was in front of me. I moved the latch, pressed the sash up as silently as I could, and stepped out onto the shallow roof of the porch. My shoes left dry dust shapes on the shingles. I pulled the window down to a 2-inch gap and left it there because the part of me that was a sun wanted air to move and light to change inside that room. I climbed down by the trellis where I had broken my wrist at 12, trying to sneak back in after a late game. At the bottom, I stood between the boxwoods and the steps and had to put my hand on the siding for balance. Behind me, across the street, Mrs. Weaver's front door stood open, and the wind moved the edge of a curtain with the patient insistence of time. I had the photo. The weight of it in my pack changed nothing in the world except the way gravity felt on my shoulders, which was enough. The fire station sat on the far side of the rail spur in a building that had been a car dealership once, the kind with lots of glass. Someone had boarded it quickly and left a narrow, person-sized entry on the side door with 2 cinder blocks stacked for a step. I knocked once the way firefighters knock, knuckles rapped 3 times in a rhythm that is habit more than code. Then I opened and spoke my name and profession into the dim. No one answered. I let my eyes adjust and breathe through my mouth because sometimes the air in places like that carries things your brain will try to put pictures to. The whiteboard by the watch desk had a calendar grid still half erased. There were entries for inspections and hydrant checks, and then the last line, no response from command, holding perimeter until sunset. It had been written in block letters, and the person who wrote it had pressed too hard on the marker. You could see the indents in the plastic surface. I went into the supply room and took only what made sense for a single person to carry without becoming too slow. a compact trauma kit with pressure bandages, a roll of tape that wasn't brittle, a compact oxygen bottle that still had pressure, which I left because I wasn't going to strap a weight to my life just because it could help someone else in a scenario I might not see. On a shelf, I found a Harris PRC 152, a handheld radio and a docking charger. The charger was cold, no lights, but the battery indicator on the radio still showed 2 bars. I keyed to scan, and it stepped through frequencies with the patience of a metronome. I thought of the first week when we were still hopping between frequencies at the station trying to get a clean line to the city. Voices had crowded then, people trying to sort responsibilities while the edges crumbled. The radio paused on a carrier and then moved on. I clipped it to my belt beside the CB handset and the small flashlight, a row of tools that made the weight of loneliness feel measurable. In the apparatus bay, the truck sat with its bay door half up, wood blocks jammed into the tracks to keep it there. The ladder racks held aluminum that would have been useful if I had a team, but a ladder longer than your own reach is a promise you can't keep alone. I stood by the bumper and pictured the crew. The captain with the good coffee, the pro BA who checked the oil twice because anxiety is fine if it means you double-check the right things, the lieutenant who said he didn't believe in luck and then touched the same bolt on the doorframe every time they stepped out. The imaginations were clean. I let them be, and walked back to the watch desk and picked up the mic. There are words you practice when you're trained that you never think you will say because they belong to a different kind of problem. Emergency traffic, I said on the local repeater frequency. This is Ethan Ward, paramedic, Columbus. I'm in Millfield. If anyone can hear this, Millfield is not safe. Do not enter without a plan and a team. If you are in Millfield, you need to leave as soon as you can. If you are sheltering, move quietly and stay out of sight. Do not try to clear buildings. I repeat, do not try to clear buildings alone. I held the mic to my ear like I was waiting for the click of a base station in a world that still had shift changes. The static said nothing back. I pressed the transmit again and added, "If anyone named Jared Ward is hearing this, I came home. I saw your name at the school. I have the photo. I'm leaving north along the rail line. I will listen on Channel 9 and on this repeater for the next 2 hours." I set the mic down because holding it tighter wasn't going to bridge distance. On my way out through the side door, I stopped at the bulletin board that had station birthday notices on one side and county alerts on the other. I pulled a pushpin and stuck the first of my 2 spare truck keys under the heading where they used to post holiday potluck sign-ups. I wrote next to it, in block letters, Ethan Ward, keys for the ranger behind diner. If you need it, take it. Leave a note on the dash. It was either a gesture at the idea of community or a way of telling myself I hadn't turned into a person who held everything tight because fear told him that this was how you stayed alive. Maybe it was both. I put the other spare key back on my belt because I wasn't naive. I moved along the tracks on the ballast where my steps would sound like part of a landscape. The rail line cut behind the grain elevators and past the water tower. On the catwalk at the tower's base, a pair of work gloves lay folded like someone had left on a 5-minute errand. I looked up at the curved belly of the tank and thought of a summer when we didn't have air conditioning at the station because the unit had burned out, and we dragged a hose to the edge of the lot and made rain for kids in the neighborhood. I took out the dictaphone because, even with everything settled into starkness, the need to mark what was honest had not gone away. "I have the photo," I said. I didn't take the front door. I didn't second-guess the way out. Saying it made me believe I could keep making decisions that didn't betray who I had been before. I cut back toward the truck through the alley that ran behind the diner and the hardware store, staying in shadow where walls gave me a side to lean on. The alley had always been a place for deliveries and shortcuts. It felt now like a bloodstream for a town that no longer needed to carry anything. I saw movement at the far end, the kind that comes from two figures grazing past a doorway without stopping to decide. They didn't turn. They were following a slow track the way a river follows a grade. I waited without turning my head because eyes make light, and light makes interest. When the way was clear, I moved to the driver's door, unlocked it with the quiet click that felt too loud, slid in, set the shotgun on the passenger floor, and laid my palm flat on the steering wheel to feel the truck's patience. The engine caught on the first turn. I kept the headlights off and rolled backward into the lane, then turned the wheel with the softest inputs I had. I had a route in mind that would take me along the east side of town and then north where the rail spur crossed a county road that had looked intact on my way in. The gas gauge sat a needle width below 3/4. The photograph in my pack pressed against my back when I leaned. It anchored me and made me heavier at the same time. At the corner by the bank, I saw where someone had tried to build a barricade with shopping carts and fence posts. It had gaps. Gaps are choices. I took one at an angle that kept my tires on smooth spots and exhaled only when I cleared it without scraping metal. I reached for the Harris radio and switched to the emergency calling channel. Channel 9, I said, the words bland but specific as they have always been. Anyone in range of Millfield, this is Ethan Ward. If you're moving, say your direction. I waited and let the truck idle low. A crackle, then a voice I didn't know. North, Quarry Road, 2 on foot. It was small and far and felt like flint striking steel inside my chest. I will avoid the quarry, I said. Stay safe and stay in cover. The voice came back with a simple copy. I looked at the dash clock even though it meant almost nothing now. It was 3:17 p.m. I said it out loud anyway for the record. If you don't write the time on a thing, your brain will lie to you later when it needs either comfort or blame. I took County Road 5 North by habit because my father had always insisted that roads with odd numbers ran that way even when the county engineers didn't strictly follow rules. It passed the water treatment plant that had kept the taps running long after they should have run dry. The chain link there had a corner bent down where something had climbed over. I didn't stop to examine tracks or tell myself a story about why it was 2 feet in from the corner rather than flush. Curiosity had edges that cut deep in this version of the world. I kept to the right side of the pavement so that if I needed to put 2 wheels into the ditch, I would not cross the crown. The land opened into squares of pasture and fields. The sky was a clear, cold blue that would have made a game day perfect. I pulled over when I could see the town's water tower and the school roof behind me in the side mirror, getting small. I turned off the engine to listen again because quiet was not absence. It was another channel. I heard wind, a distant metal rattle from a loose sign, a single bird like it had decided to test the idea of song. No engines, no long foot drag, no cluster of slow steps. I took the photograph from my pack and held it where the light could make all of us stand up out of the paper. Mom, I said, I got it. I said it because the sentence had been sitting in my chest like a heavy tool for a long time. I slid the photo back into its envelope, then into the pack, then zipped the pack closed because that was the action that felt like respect. The sun leaned toward the horizon. I did the math in the automatic part of my brain that still held shift patterns. How far I could go before dark without pushing the truck hard, where a windbreak could be, where a water source might be. There was a county park with a picnic pavilion 5 miles ahead. If the structure stood and the field around it gave me a clear view, I could stop there for the night. I had a small camp stove, heat tabs, and a pot. I had instant rice and a can of chicken that was plain and bland and exactly what the body needs. The plan formed in pieces as I rolled forward. Park with the front forward and an exit line clear. Put the shotgun within reach but not in my lap. Eat calories without salt so my thirst didn't climb before sleep. hang a small bell from the tailgate that would tell me if anything tugged at the truck in the dark. Simple, realistic routines. The kind that block out the noise of what if. Halfway to the park, I saw a plume of dust in the rear view. For half a second, something like hope flared, then chilled. Dust can mean people, and people can mean help, but it can also mean that you have become a point on someone else's map. I pulled onto a farm track, backed the truck into a hedgerow until branches scraped the passenger side and cut the engine. I listened. The dust hung and then drifted. Then a pickup rolled past slow, the bed piled with broken pallets and a generator that looked too heavy for the shocks. 2 figures sat in the front, both looking forward, neither checking side to side. They could have been like me. They could have been the kind who tried to make roads theirs. They didn't stop. When their sound faded, I waited a patient minute more, and then counted to 60. Counting is the cheapest insurance policy left. The county park pavilion still stood. It was the simple kind. Beam posts, metal roof, 10 picnic tables that had seen so many family reunions that their surfaces held a patina of stories. I parked nose out with the truck's passenger side near a post so I could step out and reach cover in one move. I did a slow circle that expanded from the truck to the pavilion and then to the tree line, scanning the ground for tracks that looked fresh. The wood chips under the swing set had not been compressed by recent weight. The grass at the trailhead was sprung back upright. I set a line with a small bell from the tailgate to the pavilion post in a way that a gentle tug would ring. It was the kind of thing you do to make sleep possible. It was not a guarantee of anything more serious than a few seconds' notice. I lit the stove in the lee of the picnic table and watched a small circle of heat shimmer rise. I had always told new EMTs to eat and drink whenever they could, and to never be ashamed of the simple maintenance that keeps people alive. I ate slowly and let my breathing match the way the light fell down through the trees. When I was done, I cleaned the pot and put everything away because leaving things out overnight had turned into a kind of disrespect I could not live with. I climbed into the truck, locked the doors, cracked the windows an inch, and laid the shotgun down with the muzzle toward the floor and the safety on. I set the Harris radio to scan and the CB to channel 9. I clicked the dictaphone on and made a grim smile at the way the speaker crackled like an old record. I came home, I said. I kept my promise to myself. I didn't come for supplies. I didn't pretend I was there to save anything. I found what I came for. Sleep came in thin layers. A gust rattled the metal roof and brought me up. I listened and counted 2 minutes and dropped into the next layer. A raccoon worked the bell at some point, and I smiled despite the jangle because the bell had done exactly its job for exactly the wrong species. At 1:07 a.m., a voice cracked through Channel 9 like a match in a quiet room. "Northbound pickup at County Park," a woman said. The words were soft as if she were trying to thread a needle without waking anyone nearby. "If you're out there, you made it through Millfield?" "This is Ethan," I said softly. "Yes. Moved through from west to north. I'm parked at the pavilion." A pause then. "Maya, Mansfield unit, I told you to be fast." "I was," I said. "Thank you." "You're clear north of the quarry. There's a bridge out on County 12. Don't try it in the dark." Her voice left a long space after that. "Did you find what you needed?" "I did," I said. "Then keep moving," she said gently. "Memories are heavy if you sleep on them." In the morning, I broke camp with the same neatness I had always used in the station bay. The truck started hard on the first crank, then settled into the low rattle that felt like a handshake. Driving north, I watched for the bridge she had mentioned, and when I saw the gap, I didn't stop to stand on the edge and measure distances with my eyes the way I might have a lifetime ago. I turned on to the alternate and took an extra 15 minutes for the sake of a rule I had written in my head during the last month. Don't try to prove anything to yourself that you don't need to. The land opened again, and the sky widened, and the river at the state line slid by with the same patient indifference it had shown all my life. I pulled over just long enough to step out and breathe at once with the sun on my face. The Harris radio clicked and skimmed. The CB murmured a soft hiss. On the dictaphone, I recorded the simple lines: distance traveled, direction, fuel remaining, and one additional fact I needed to say into a place that could hold it. "Dad," I said, "I saw you. I did not use the front door. I did not second-guess the way out." It was not bravery or cowardice. It was a decision made by a son who had to live with himself on the other side of all of it. I drove with the photograph like a heartbeat against my spine, an honest weight. I did not look back at Millfield again in the mirror because the part of me that wanted to was the same part that would always find a reason to turn around and check one more place, open one more door, push just a little farther into a building because maybe, everything in me had been trained to push, to squeeze minutes out of seconds for the sake of a better outcome. 30 days had taught me a different lesson. Sometimes you honor the life you had by not letting the present pull you into rooms that won't give you anything you can carry. I tightened the strap on the pack, set my eyes on the road ahead, and drove on into the day, radio scanning, windows cracked, engine warm, the route in front of me measured on a paper map I had marked myself, carrying the piece of my life I came to get, and the knowledge that I had left before the town could decide to keep me as one more echo. Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like and subscribe. Your support keeps these creepypastas coming. Until next time, stay alert, stay safe, and never ignore the feeling that something is watching.